I keep telling myself it didn't mean anything. That's what I've been doing for the last 3 hours. Lying here in the dark, staring at the ceiling like it owes me an answer. Running the same 12 seconds of tonight over and over in my head, like if I replay them enough times, they'll finally make sense. She went silent. That's it. That's the whole thing. I told her about my date. My date, not hers, mine. And she just went quiet. Set her fork down, looked at the table, and didn't say another word for the rest of the night. It shouldn't mean anything. We've been friends for 4 years. She's heard about every terrible situationship, every almost relationship, I think this one might actually be different, that turned into a Wednesday text that said, "Hey, I think I need some space." She sat on that couch with me through all of it, poured the wine, said the right things, laughed at the right moments. She's never gone quiet before. And I can't stop thinking about why tonight was different. I can't stop thinking about her face. The exact second I said his name. Wait. No. There was no his. I said her name. I said Maya's name. I said, "I think I really like her." And I was smiling when I said it, and I looked up to find Jamie's reaction, and she wasn't smiling back. She was just still. In a way, Jamie almost never is. Jamie is motion. Jamie is laughter. Jamie is finishing your sentence before you've decided what you meant to say. And she was just sitting there, fork halfway to the plate, not moving, not looking at me. I asked her if she was okay. She said yes. She said yes, and then she said she was tired, and then she cleaned up the kitchen and said goodnight and went to her room. And I sat on the couch for 45 minutes before I came in here. And now I can't sleep. And I keep telling myself it didn't mean anything. But here's the thing about lying to yourself at 2 a.m. It never works. Jamie and I met the way a lot of people meet in this city. Sideways, by accident, through someone else entirely. It was a rooftop party in Astoria. My coworker Priya invited me to celebrate something. I can't even remember what now. And I didn't want to go because I'd had a long week, and I was already in sweatpants mentally even if I wasn't physically. But Priya had that look she gets where she doesn't actually ask you things so much as inform you of them. And so I went. Jamie was standing by the railing, looking out over the water. She had a beer in one hand and she was laughing at something someone had said. And I remember noticing her laugh before I noticed anything else about her. It was loud and completely unself-conscious. The kind of laugh that doesn't perform itself for anyone. I was across the rooftop and I could still hear it clearly over the music. Priya introduced us. Jamie turned around and shook my hand and said, "Finally, another person who looks like they'd rather be reading right now." And I laughed, and that was that. We talked for 3 hours. We missed the food. We missed the toasts. At some point, the party thinned out around us and we were still standing there, and neither of us had noticed. What I remember most about that first night is how easy it was. Not in the way that things are easy when you're pretending. Easy the way breathing is easy. I didn't perform anything. I didn't monitor what I said before I said it. I just talked, and she talked back. And time did that thing it does when you're not watching it, where it moves without asking permission. We exchanged numbers. I assumed it would be one of those city friendship things that starts with real intention and slowly becomes a contact you scroll past without texting. It wasn't. She texted me the next morning. Just a link to an article about something I'd mentioned the night before. A book, I think. Or a documentary. With no message attached. Just the link. And that was it. That was the whole texture of how Jamie communicates. No filler. No performance. Just, "Here's a thing I thought you'd want." I texted back, already halfway through it. She sent back a single laughing emoji and nothing else. By the end of that month, we had eaten dinner together 4 times, started a running thread of book recommendations that got wildly off topic almost immediately, and she had talked me through a particularly bad Thursday at work in a way that felt less like comfort and more like someone taking the problem seriously enough to actually think about it. By the end of that year, she had a key to my apartment. Not in a way that meant anything complicated. In the way that two people who spend a lot of time together eventually stop going through the formality of buzzing each other in. She'd let herself in when I was running late. I'd show up at her place with coffee without texting first. We had the specific ease of people who have stopped needing to prove they belong in each other's spaces. That's what I want you to understand before I tell you the rest. What we had was real. What we built over 4 years, the inside jokes and the shared shorthand, and the way she could tell from my typing speed whether I was upset or just busy. All of it was real. It wasn't a performance of friendship. It was the actual thing. And that's exactly why tonight confused me so much. Because in 4 years, I have told Jamie about every person I've ever wanted. She has listened to all of it. She has given real opinions when I asked for them, and stayed quiet when I didn't. She has watched me make choices she disagreed with and not said a word. She has been, in every way I know how to measure, the kind of friend who knows how to hold your life carefully. She has never once gone silent. Not like that. Not like the silence tonight, which wasn't absence. It was weight. I keep coming back to that. The weight of it. The way the quiet in that kitchen felt like something was being pressed down inside it, like she had a lot to say and was choosing, very deliberately, not to say any of it. I don't know what to do with that. I genuinely don't. And that's the thing about knowing someone as well as I know Jamie. When they do something out of character, it doesn't slide off. It lodges. It stays in the space behind your sternum and hums at a frequency you can't quite locate. That's where this is living right now. Right here in my chest, at 2 a.m, while the ceiling offers absolutely nothing useful. The honest version of this story doesn't start tonight. I know that now. I didn't know it 3 hours ago when I was sitting on the couch staring at her closed bedroom door. But I know it now. The honest version starts earlier, weeks earlier, maybe months. And I've been not knowing it on purpose, which is its own kind of knowing. Let me tell you about the Sunday 6 weeks ago. We were doing what we do most Sundays when neither of us has plans. Making too much coffee, occupying opposite ends of her couch, reading different things. Jamie was working through some thick paperback that she'd been carrying around for a month. I was scrolling through my phone, which is not reading, but I was pretending it was. At some point I looked up. I don't know why. I just looked up, the way you do sometimes randomly, for no reason. And I saw her. The way the light from the window was coming in sideways and landing across her shoulder. The way her brow was furrowed slightly, the way it always is when she's concentrating on something she actually cares about. She had one knee pulled up to her chest, and her coffee mug balanced on the armrest, and she hadn't looked up. She had no idea I was watching, and I looked at her for a moment longer than I should have. And then I looked back at my phone. And I thought, nothing. I actively thought nothing. I made my mind go still and flat, and I scrolled, and I made sure my face was doing something normal. And eventually she looked up and asked if I wanted more coffee, and I said yes, and everything was exactly the same as it always was. But I noticed that I had looked. And I noticed that I was glad she hadn't seen me look. Those two things sat in the back of my head quietly. Not loudly. Not with any urgency. Just there. Like something you set down on a counter intending to deal with later, and then keep walking past. 2 weeks after that, we went to her friend Sasha's birthday dinner. A big table, 8 of us, a restaurant downtown that was too loud for the conversation we were all pretending to have. I was seated across from Jamie, which almost never happens. Usually we end up next to each other. Default, without planning it. And I spent a frankly unreasonable portion of that dinner watching her talk. Not staring. I wasn't staring. I was doing the normal thing of glancing across the table the way you do at a group dinner. But I noticed, in the way you notice things you're cataloging without meaning to, that she laughs differently with a group than she does when it's just the two of us. In a group, she's present and warm and genuinely funny, but she's also a little bit held back, a little bit curated, like she's performing a version of herself that is accurate, but not complete. When it's just the two of us, she's something else, more unguarded, more willing to follow a thought all the way to the strange end of it. I noticed that I preferred that version. I noticed, and then I had another glass of wine, and I talked to the woman next to me about something completely unrelated, and I was fine. I was totally fine. But something had started keeping score inside me. Something I hadn't authorized. Something that was quietly cataloging. The way Jamie tilts her head when she's thinking about whether to say a thing out loud. The specific way she says my name when she finds something I've said funny, a little stretched, a little warm, like she's turning the word over in her mouth. The way she always refills my glass before I notice it's low, without drawing attention to the fact that she noticed. Little things. Small things. Things that, taken individually, meant nothing. Things that, added together, were beginning to mean something I didn't have a word for yet. I didn't want a word for it. That's the truth. I didn't go looking for one. Because we had something good. Really, genuinely good. And I knew from the part of my brain that stays operational even when the rest of me is being reckless that the word for it would be disruptive. That finding the word would change things. That I could keep what we had intact as long as I didn't name what was happening inside me. So I didn't name it. I just kept walking past it, every day. Setting it on the counter. Dealing with it later. And then I met Maya. I met Maya at a gallery opening 3 weeks ago, through a mutual acquaintance I barely know. She was standing in front of a piece I didn't understand and explaining it to someone in a way that made me want to understand it, and she turned and caught me listening, and instead of being annoyed about it, she just expanded the explanation to include me. She was smart and warm and genuinely interesting, and she asked me out at the end of the night in a way that was direct, without being presumptuous, and I said yes. And when I got home, I texted Jamie about it. Jamie's response, "Tell me everything after." Also, that's the most romantic gallery opening story I've ever heard. That felt normal. That felt like us. Our date was last week. It went well, genuinely well. Maya is easy to be around. She laughs at the right moments and asks good questions, and we talked for 4 hours without noticing, and I walked home feeling the specific lightness of something that might actually be going somewhere. I didn't text Jamie that night. I don't know why. I told myself I was tired. I told myself I'd tell her in person. I told myself it wasn't a big deal. What I know now is that some part of me already understood something I wasn't ready to put into words yet. The part that had been keeping score without my permission. The part that wondered, very quietly, in a frequency I kept trying to turn down, what Jamie's face would look like when I said Maya's name. Tonight started the way our Thursday evenings usually do. She came over around 7 with groceries. Her turn to cook. My turn to provide the wine and the playlist, and the unhelpful commentary from the bar stool. We have this division of labor that developed completely organically over years. I am more enthusiastic about cooking than I am skilled at it. Jamie is both, and she knows it, and she doesn't make me feel like an idiot about it. She just hands me a glass and tells me to sit down. Tonight she made pasta. The kind she makes when she's in a good mood, the one that takes more effort than it looks like it does, with the sauce that has to be watched carefully. She had music on, and she was humming a little, which she only does when she doesn't realize she's doing it. And I was on the bar stool watching her move around my kitchen, the way she's moved around it for years, like the space is hers too. And I felt, very quietly, the thing I had been walking past for weeks. I didn't look at it directly. I just felt the edge of it, the shape of it in my peripheral vision, casting a shadow at the corner of every moment. We ate at the counter the way we usually do. She thinks the dining table is too formal for it being just the two of us, and she's right, it is, and we've never once used it for just the two of us. We opened a second bottle of wine. She was telling me about something at work, a situation with a colleague that had been escalating slowly into absurdity, And she was doing that thing she does when she tells stories, where she acts out both parts with her hands and her voice and her face. And I was laughing at the right moments, but I was also aware of something building in the back of my chest. I wanted to tell her about Maya. I had wanted to tell her since last week. That was the thing I hadn't let myself examine too directly. I had this date. It went well. I came home feeling light. And instead of texting my best friend, I went to sleep. And then another day passed, and another. And every time I thought about bringing it up, something in me deflected. Found another topic. Let the moment go. Tonight I ran out of runway. There was a pause in the conversation. A comfortable pause, the kind we have all the time, where neither of us needs to fill it. And into that pause I heard myself say, "So I should probably tell you about how the date went." She looked up from her glass. "The gallery woman, Maya?" "Yeah. I've been waiting for you to bring it up. How was it?" And I smiled. I felt myself smile, genuinely, because it had been good, because thinking about it brought back that lightness. And I said, "Really good, actually. Like, unexpectedly good." We talked until they were basically stacking chairs around us. I think I actually like her. I was looking at her when I said the last part. I don't know why I was looking so directly at her. Maybe because I'd been waiting to say it. Maybe because Jamie's reactions to things are one of my favorite things to watch. She feels things visibly, but never in the ways you expect. She's not effusive. She doesn't perform emotion, but something always moves across her face that tells you exactly what's happening inside. I was watching for that movement. What I saw was something I didn't have a name for. She didn't smile. She didn't say anything. She set her fork down, not dramatically, carefully, like she was making sure it was placed correctly. And she looked at the counter. Not at me, at the counter. And the movement that crossed her face was contained, like something behind a pane of glass, like something was pressing from the inside, and she was pressing back from the outside. The silence lasted maybe 4 seconds. To me, it lasted approximately a year. "That's great," she said, eventually, to the counter. "Yeah?" I said. "Yeah." She picked up her glass. "She sounds great, Maya." She said the name carefully, evenly, like she was making sure she said it correctly. And then she asked me something about the restaurant we'd gone to, where it was, if I'd been before. And I answered, and the conversation moved, but it was different now. There was something underneath it. A frequency I could feel but couldn't hear. She became quieter after that. Not absent. Jamie doesn't go absent. She's too present a person for that. But quieter. Less of her in the room, somehow, even though she was sitting right next to me. Like she had turned a dial inside herself, very deliberately, while I wasn't looking. I asked if she was okay twice. The first time she said yes, a little quickly. The second time she said she was just tired, and looked at me when she said it. And there was something in the look that I felt behind my breastbone and couldn't explain. She helped clean up. She moves through kitchens efficiently. She always has. She rinsed things and stacked things and handed me dishes to dry. And we were standing close the way you do in a small kitchen, shoulders almost touching. And she didn't say anything, and I didn't say anything, and the quiet between us was doing something I couldn't classify. At one point I reached past her to put a glass away, and I felt her go very still for just a moment, like she stopped breathing. And then she moved aside to give me room and said, "Sorry, I'm in the way." And her voice was fine, completely fine, but she didn't look at me when she said it. I stood there holding the glass, and something was happening in my chest that I did not have language for. She said goodnight 20 minutes later, said she was going to head to bed, said the pasta was from a new recipe, and she wasn't sure about the balance of the sauce, and I told her the pasta was perfect, and she nodded and said thanks and went to her room. I sat on the couch. And here is the thing I sat with, alone in my living room, for 45 minutes while her light was on under her door and I could hear, very faintly, the sound of her moving around the way she does when she can't settle. I wasn't thinking about Maya. I hadn't been thinking about Maya since the moment Jamie set her fork down. I was thinking about the way Jamie's face looked in that 4-second silence, the thing behind the glass, the pressing in and the pressing back, and the question I didn't know how to ask, because I didn't know what I would do with the answer. I was thinking about all the Sundays on the couch and the dinners and the late-night texts, and the key on my keyring, and the pasta that took more effort than it looked like it did, and the way she says my name when she finds something funny, a little stretched, a little warm. I was thinking about the score that something inside me had been keeping without my permission, and I was thinking, oh no. Because here is the thing about running from an understanding. When it finally catches you, it doesn't knock politely, it just arrives. All of it at once. 4 years of it, standing in your living room, while your best friend's light is on under her door, and you're not thinking about the woman you told her about. You're thinking about her. You're thinking about the silence. You're thinking about the fork. You're thinking about the way she said Maya's name like she was being careful with it. And you know, even if you don't know what to do with it yet, even if the knowing feels like standing at the edge of something very high and looking down, you know. But before we continue, if you've made it this far, something in this story is hitting somewhere real. That thing you recognize but can't quite name. That silence that weighs more than words. That moment of oh no that arrives all at once and changes everything. If that's landing for you, hit the like button right now. It takes 2 seconds and it genuinely helps this channel keep making stories like this one. And if you're not subscribed yet, subscribe and turn on the bell. That way YouTube lets you know when the next story drops. Now I want to ask you something in the comments. Have you ever had a moment where someone else's reaction told you something about yourself that you weren't ready to know? Something that landed before you had words for it? Tell me about it. I read every single one. And where are you watching from? Drop your city. I'll put a heart on it. Okay, back to our story. I did the thing I always do when I don't know what to do. I convinced myself I was overreacting. I am, genuinely, a person who is capable of very elaborate interior experiences about very ordinary things. I have spiraled about a text message before. I have built entire psychological edifices out of a tone of voice that turned out to be someone having a headache. I am not always to be trusted as a reliable narrator of my own emotional landscape. So I lay in bed at 2 a.m, and I made the argument to myself. Jamie was tired. Jamie had a long week. She mentioned it at dinner, twice. People are allowed to go quiet. People are allowed to not perform enthusiasm for every piece of news. The silence didn't mean anything. The fork thing was nothing. I was taking a completely ordinary Thursday evening and running it through some kind of interpretive machine I had built without realizing it, and the output was telling me things about myself that I didn't want to be told. That was the argument. It was a reasonably good argument. I almost believed it. I woke up the next morning and she was gone. She'd let herself out early, which wasn't unusual. She has morning meetings on Fridays. But there was coffee in the pot. She'd made it before she left, which she does sometimes. And there was a note on the counter that said, "Sauce was better than I thought. Have a good day." Nothing else. That was a Jamie note. Completely accurate. And still I stood there in my kitchen reading it 4 times, looking for something in it I couldn't name, which told me everything I needed to know about the state I was in. I texted her at noon. "Thanks for the coffee. You were right, the sauce was perfect." She texted back. "Told you." "How's your Friday?" "Normal. Completely normal." And I wrote back normally, and the conversation was fine, and I put my phone face down on my desk and stared at my computer screen and thought, okay, you're fine. Everything is fine. But something had shifted, in a way I couldn't unshift. The weeks that followed had a quality I can only describe as sideways. Everything was the same on the surface. We texted. We made plans. We had dinner, twice, once at her place, once out with Priya and another friend. I saw her laugh. I watched her talk. Everything was exactly what it had always been. And I was different inside all of it. I was watching myself now, monitoring in real time what I felt when she walked into a room, cataloging, consciously now rather than unconsciously, what happened in my chest when she said something funny and turned to make sure I'd caught it. Noticing the way time feels different when she's there versus when she's not there, not missing her when she's gone, exactly, but aware of a different quality to the air. I tried to cancel plans once, told her I wasn't feeling well. She showed up with soup and a specific kind of crackers she remembered I liked, and I let her in because what was I going to do? And we watched a movie, and she fell asleep on my couch about 40 minutes in the way she does sometimes. And I sat there in the dark watching her chest rise and fall and thinking, this is the problem. This is the entire problem. You can't run from someone who shows up with soup. I went on a second date with Maya. It was fine. She's genuinely lovely. She said something in the first hour that made me laugh out loud, the real kind. And I thought, this could work. I want this to work. This is a person who could matter. And I was present for most of it. I was trying. And Maya is perceptive. And she's the kind of person who would notice if you weren't fully there. And at the end of the night she said, you seem a little far away tonight. I'm sorry, I said. Work stuff. She nodded. She didn't push. She said goodnight in a way that was warm but uncertain. And I drove home, and I sat in my car outside my building for a while, and I thought about what it meant that I'd spent a second date with a genuinely wonderful woman thinking about someone else. I knew what it meant. I had known what it meant since Thursday. Since the fork. Since the 4-second silence that lasted approximately a year. I just hadn't been willing to stand all the way inside the knowing. The thing that finally made me stop running was a Tuesday. An unremarkable Tuesday, about 3 weeks after that dinner. We were on the phone, just a regular call, nothing significant. She was walking home from something and I was making tea. And she was telling me something, a story about her day, and I was listening, and in the middle of it she laughed at something she'd said. That specific laugh, the one I'd noticed at the rooftop party 4 years ago, the one that doesn't perform itself for anyone. And something happened in my chest that I had no framework for. It was just warmth, a lot of it. Sudden and uncomplicated, not the anxious cataloging of the past weeks. Just warmth, clean and clear, flooding up through my sternum like something that had been held behind a door for a long time had finally gotten through. And I thought, oh, not oh no this time. Just oh. Oh. There it is. This is what it is. I've been in love with my best friend. I set my tea down. I kept talking. I said the right things at the right times, and she didn't notice anything different. And we hung up 20 minutes later, and I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after. Not panicking. That surprised me. I expected panic. I had spent weeks bracing for it, treating this understanding like a grenade I was circling. But what came, when I finally stopped running and turned around and looked at it directly, wasn't panic. It was something that felt almost like relief. Like, oh, that's what this has been. That's what I've been carrying. That's what all the careful not looking was protecting me from. It wasn't smaller than I thought it would be. It was bigger. It was 4 years of bigger, in fact, because now I was seeing all the moments I'd looked at as friendship and understanding that they had always been something else too. The Sunday afternoons, the key on my keyring, the crackers she remembered, the pasta that took more effort than it looked. The silence when I said Maya's name. The weight of that silence, which was starting to look, from where I was standing now, like it might have meant something. Like it might have been telling me something I was too busy not knowing to hear. And here's the thing about finally arriving at an understanding you've been running from for weeks or months or possibly years. You can't unknow it. You can't go back to the easy version. You can only go forward. And forward meant I had to decide what to do with this thing I was holding. This feeling that was too large and too specific and too 4 years deep to be waved away. Too real to pretend it wasn't real. Forward meant I had to figure out what I was going to say, or whether I was going to say anything at all. I didn't say anything right away. I sat with it for another week, turned it over, looked at every side of it, tried very seriously to talk myself out of it. Not out of the feeling, which I understood by now was not a thing I could logic my way out of, but out of saying anything. Out of handing this to her and changing what we had. Because I had thought, very clearly, about what the risks were. Jamie hadn't said anything. That silence at dinner, whatever it had been, was not a declaration. It was an absence. It was a 4-second window that I had been reading and rereading because I needed it to mean something. And maybe it did, and maybe it didn't, and I didn't actually know. What I knew was that we had something real. We had 4 years of real. And there were versions of this that ended with me handing her something she didn't want to hold, and that would mean the end of what we had. And what we had was not small. Not a thing I was willing to light on fire for the sake of being honest about a feeling she might not share. That was the argument for silence. For a week, it was a good argument. And then she called me on a Sunday night and said, "I need to tell you something." Her voice was careful. The way it had been that night with the fork. Careful in the way that tells you someone has been constructing a sentence for a while. "Okay," I said. "I've been weird lately," she said. "I know you've noticed. You always notice." "A little," I said. There was a pause. "When you told me about Maya," she said. "I had a reaction I didn't expect, and I've been trying to figure out what to do with it since then. And I think I was wrong to just go quiet and not tell you what was happening. My heart was doing something I can only describe as architectural, like things were shifting into positions they'd been approaching for a very long time." "What was happening?" I asked. Another pause. "I think," she said carefully, "I think I've been holding something for a while that I didn't have permission to hold. And hearing that you liked someone made it real in a way I hadn't expected, and I didn't know how to be around it. So I just went quiet. And I'm sorry. That wasn't fair to you." I sat with what she'd said. "What were you holding?" I said. And she was quiet again. But this time the quiet was different. Not the pressed back kind. Not the glass wall. This was the kind of quiet that happens before someone decides to stop being careful. "You know what I was holding," she said. "I think you've known for a little while." I closed my eyes. "Yeah," I said. "I think I have." We didn't say a lot after that. That's the part that surprises people when I tell this story. They expect the big declaration, the moment of cinematic catharsis, the music swelling. What actually happened was the two of us on opposite ends of a phone call being very quiet and very honest with each other in the way that doesn't require a lot of words when you know someone as well as we knew each other. She said she wasn't sure what she expected from telling me. She said she wasn't asking for anything. She said she needed me to know because not telling me was making her into someone she didn't want to be around me, and our friendship mattered too much for her to keep managing something inside herself that was affecting how she showed up. I said I understood. I said I had something to tell her too. She said she knew, and I said, "How long have you known?" And she said, "Since the gallery opening, since your first text about her." Which meant she had known before I had. She had known, and she had been careful about it, and she had said the right things. Tell me everything after. That's the most romantic gallery opening story. And she had gone to that dinner and sat across from me and watched me fall slowly into an understanding she had already arrived at. And when I said Maya's name and said I thought I really liked her, she had set her fork down. Because she had known. We didn't fix anything that night. We didn't resolve it. We didn't decide what it meant or what came next, or what we were going to do with two people who felt the same thing and had no map for it. We agreed that we needed to think, that this was too important to make fast, that what we had was too valuable to get wrong. She said, "I don't want to lose you." I said, "You're not going to lose me." She said, "You don't know that." And I said, "I know that." She laughed a little, the specific one, and I felt it in the center of my chest, warm and clear. We said goodnight. I sat in my living room in the dark for a while. The thing I felt was not simple. It was not uncomplicated. There was something aching in it. The loss of the version of things we'd had. The clean simplicity of the friendship before I had words for what I felt. There was something frightening in it. There was something that looked like grief for a possible future that had closed when I understood what was actually happening. But underneath all of that, sitting in my quiet living room, there was something else. Something that felt like the specific relief of no longer carrying something alone. Whatever happened next, and I didn't know what was going to happen next. And that was real, and I wasn't pretending otherwise. Whatever came after this moment was going to be navigated by two people who had finally decided to stop managing their own interiors in isolation. That wasn't nothing. That wasn't even close to nothing. The weeks that followed were honest, in a way that was uncomfortable and necessary. We talked more than we usually talked, and differently. Not the easy conversational shorthand we'd built over years, but something more careful and more real. We said things that were hard to say and sat with the responses. We disagreed, a little, about timing, and about what we wanted, and about what we were afraid of. I stopped seeing Maya. I told her before I told Jamie I'd stopped. Maya was gracious about it in a way that I'm still grateful for. She said, "I could tell there was someone else. I was hoping I was wrong." She wasn't wrong. The truth is, we didn't ride off into anything certain. I want to be honest about that. We were two people who loved each other in the same way, but weren't on the same timeline about what to do with it. She needed more time. I had more time to give. There was something unresolved between us that didn't resolve neatly into a happy ending I could tie with a bow. But something ended. The version of me that walked past her feeling every day, setting it on the counter, intending to deal with it later. That version ended. The understanding, once arrived at, could not be unarrived at. I could not go back to the easy, comfortable not knowing. And I found, in the weeks after that phone call, that I didn't want to. Even with the ache, even with the uncertainty. Even with the mornings where I didn't know what we were and couldn't ask because neither of us knew yet. I was more myself than I had been in months. Maybe more myself than I'd ever been. In a certain specific way. Because I had been so careful for so long about not looking directly at what I felt, and the act of finally looking, of letting the feeling be real and named and mine, had given me something I hadn't realized I'd been missing. I knew what I wanted. For the first time in a long time, I actually knew. That's not small. That's not even close to small. She changed the direction of everything, and she didn't even know she was doing it when she went quiet. Sometimes that's how the most important things arrive. Not announced, not dramatic. Just a silence in a kitchen on a Thursday night that lodges in your chest and won't let go. Sometimes the understanding you've been most afraid of is the one that, when it finally reaches you, feels the most like coming home to yourself. If this story found something in you, write Saudade in the comments. That's how I'll know you made it to the end with me. And if you want to stay for more stories like this, click the one coming up on your screen right now. Take care of yourself. Until next time. If you want to hear uncensored, too hot for YouTube stories, check out my Patreon in the description.